The rain-slicked deck of the luxury yacht felt like glass under my sensible shoes, a cold reminder that I never truly had a footing in this world. Boston Harbor churned below us, dark and unforgiving, much like the mood at my parents' 45th anniversary gala. I stood near the railing, clutching a glass of mineral water, while the city's elite swirled around me in a sea of silk and arrogance. My brother Tyler stood at the center of it all, his designer suit perfectly tailored to hide the hollow man beneath. He raised his crystal flute, the amber liquid catching the light, but he wasn't looking at our parents. His eyes were locked on mine, gleaming with a predatory sharpness. "A toast," Tyler announced, his voice booming over the soft melodies of the string quartet, "to 4 decades of Thompson excellence. And to my sister, Abigail, our resident dusty relic." A ripple of polite, cruel laughter moved through the crowd. Tyler leaned in, his smirk widening. While the rest of us are out here building empires and reshaping the skyline, Abigail is busy cataloging dead men's thoughts in that quiet little library of hers. Honestly, it's a hobby for the useless. Mom, Dad, you really should apologize to our guest for her embarrassing lack of ambition. That plain dress is almost as depressing as her academic career. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, not as a comfort, but as a weight. "He's right, Abigail," Gregory muttered, his voice thick with the scotch he'd been drinking since noon. "You're a Thompson. You should be an asset, not an awkward footnote. Apologize to your brother for that surly look on your face and try to at least pretend you belong here." My mother, Angela, didn't even look at me. She just adjusted her diamond necklace, her silence a sharp confirmation of my worthlessness. Tyler wasn't done. He stepped closer, the smell of expensive cigars and unearned confidence radiating off him. "But don't worry, family. I'm about to put that research of hers to good use. You know that protected land you spent 3 years writing about, Abigail? The one you said was an untouchable historical site? I just signed the paperwork to pave right over it. A $400 million development is going up next month. It turns out, historical significance doesn't stand a chance against a real man's bank account. You were just too meek to stop me. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." My eyes remained dry. I felt no urge to demand a justification or plead for the preservation of the land I had spent years defending. Sentiment is a liability in a high-stakes acquisition, and I had long ago liquidated mine where this family was concerned. A clinical stillness settled in my chest, transforming their insults into the raw data I needed for a final settlement. To my family, I was a background character, a quiet academic who lived for old paper. They mistook my silence for a lack of resources. They had no idea I was the primary stakeholder in their version of family, and I was about to trigger a total divestment. I walked away from Tyler's smug face without a word. My pace was deliberate. Gregory shouted for me to return and show some Thompson grit, but I didn't break my stride. I reached the stern of the yacht, where the shadows of the cabin shielded me from the festive lights and the judging eyes of Boston's upper crust. The freezing spray of the harbor hit my face, a refreshing contrast to the stifling air of the ballroom. I retrieved my secure phone from my clutch. Tyler had mocked its plain, encrypted interface earlier, assuming it was a toy for a simpleton. I bypassed my personal apps and logged directly into the Thompson Global Partners mainframe. The screen glowed with the cold light of authority, the kind forged in numbers, strategy, and silent retribution. I opened a high-priority line to Lauren, my chief operating officer. "Lauren, it's Abigail," I typed. My movements precise. "The holding period is over. I've been the silent guarantor for my brother's shell companies for too long. It is time to call in the debt. Initiate a hostile takeover of Blue Harbor Holdings immediately. I want every asset, every line of credit, and every leveraged piece of equipment transferred to our portfolio by daybreak." Lauren's reply was instantaneous. "Confirmed. Abigail, we already control 42% through our hidden subsidiaries. Triggering the debt-to-equity clauses we acquired last quarter will give us a supermajority. We will have total control by the time the markets open. What about the harbor project? I looked out at the dark horizon, thinking of the historical site Tyler planned to destroy. He viewed archives as dead weight. He thought intelligence was a weakness. Revoke the permits, I commanded. File an injunction for environmental fraud. Use the specific geological data from my doctoral thesis. The evidence is airtight, and as of now, so is our grip on his company. Freeze Blue Harbor's operating accounts by 12:15 a.m. I checked my internal metrics, looking for a trace of regret, but I found only a balanced ledger. For 3 decades, my empathy had been a resource they had overdrawn, and tonight, the account was closed for good. I tucked the phone away and smoothed the fabric of my dress. It was 12:03 a.m. The liquidation was underway. As the laughter of the party swelled around me, I retreated into the quiet corridors of my mind, tracing the map of a debt they didn't even know they owed. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, a role that felt less like a choice and more like a cage without bars. They saw my simple life as a librarian as a sign of weakness, never realizing it was a strategic position. I kept wondering what I had ever done wrong to be cast as the black sheep, but tonight, the balance sheet was finally coming clear. My mind drifted back to the moments that never made it into the family scrapbooks. When I was 12, Gregory had told me I was a phase, not a future, and back then, I actually believed him. Since then, my compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. While they paraded their wealth, I was the one who quietly paid for the private security that protected this very yacht when Tyler's gambling debts nearly brought the wrong kind of attention to our doorstep. I remembered the cold weight of the air 2 years ago when Beatrice, Tyler's wife, arrived at my apartment in a panic. She had overdrawn her accounts again and was terrified of Gregory's reaction. I had written a check for $3,924 for her charity gala dress, money I'd saved from a research grant. Tonight, she stood across the room in a gown that cost more than my annual library salary, sneering at my secondhand cardigan without a flicker of recognition for the debt she owed. This wasn't just a breakdown, it was a subscription to a family that I was finally canceling. I had been the one who ensured the property taxes were paid when their conglomerate was on the edge of foreclosure, yet they treated me as an inconvenient footnote. The cracked photo frame on the mantel back at the estate sat exactly where their apology should have been, but I realize now that an apology was a currency they didn't possess. The scent of salt air and expensive perfume suddenly felt like a trap. I stepped back into the warmth of the cabin, only to find Tyler waiting like a vulture. He had that glint in his eye, the kind he got right before he decided to destroy something beautiful just to see it break. Without warning, he snatched my phone from the small table where I'd set it down. He looked at the encrypted lock screen, his lips curling into a sneer as he held it up for our parents to see. "Still playing at being a spy, Abigail?" he mocked, his voice cutting through the sophisticated murmur of the party. Maybe if you spent less time on these little gadgets and more time learning the real estate market, you wouldn't be such an embarrassment to the Thompson name. Angela drifted over, her silk gown rustling like a warning. She didn't ask for the phone back. She just looked at me with a profound, weary disappointment. "She's right, honey," Gregory added, his slurred words heavy with a cruelty that had been normalized over decades. "We've made a decision. Tyler needs liquid capital to cover the expansion on the harbor, and we're tired of subsidizing your little academic retreat." He took a long sip of his scotch before delivering the final blow. "We're selling the university archival wing. The donor agreement is in my name, and I'm pulling the funding. It's dead weight, Abigail, just like your research." My archival space, my only sanctuary, the place where the silence actually meant something, was being sold off to pay for Tyler's arrogance. They were normalizing the destruction of my life's work while smiling at their guests. I didn't beg. I didn't point out that my research was currently the only thing keeping the harbor's ecosystem from collapsing under Tyler's poorly planned concrete. My anger wasn't loud, it was a balance sheet, and they had just entered a massive deficit. "I see," I said, my voice as flat as a digital ledger. So you're selling the one place I call home to fund a project that doesn't even have its environmental permits yet? Tyler laughed, a sharp sound that echoed around the room. Oh, I'll get the permits, Abigail. Money always finds a way. You just focus on packing your boxes. I didn't waste another second on the yacht's deck. I walked straight to the onboard library, a mahogany-paneled room that my parents used for show, but never for reading. I called Walter, my lead attorney, and put him on my secure line. The audit of the family trust, I said, my voice low and clinical. I want the final report now. No more waiting. Abigail, I was just about to call you, Walter replied, his tone unusually grave. We found it. The lethal discovery we've been hunting for in the deep ledgers. He paused, and I could hear the rustle of digital files being opened. 18 years ago, your birth parents left a $750,000 legacy intended to fund your research and the preservation of that harbor land. I felt the air leave my lungs. And Angela and Gregory forged your birth parents' signatures. Walter delivered the kill shot. They stole that entire legacy to jumpstart Tyler's first real estate holding company. They didn't just neglect you, Abigail. They committed systematic fraud to build their entire house of cards on your stolen future. I looked at the cracked photo frame on the library's desk, a picture of a 6-year-old me with my birth parents. It sat exactly where their loyalty should have been. I thought of the silent regret someone like my great-grandmother Eleanor might have felt, watching this betrayal unfold from the sidelines. Perhaps she was the one who had left the trail for me to find. The sun rose over Boston, but for my family, the light only brought the cold shadow of reality. At 8 a.m. Sharp, the headlines hit every major financial outlet. Mystery librarian revealed as CEO of $84 billion biotech empire. The digital editions carried the secondary blow. Thomson Industries flagged for systematic fraud and forgery. I sat in my quiet penthouse, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the harbor that was now legally mine. The private elevator chimed, and Tyler, Angela, and Gregory burst out. There was no swagger left in Tyler's walk. He was pale, his hands shaking as he held a copy of the morning paper. My parents looked shell-shocked, their faces lined with a sudden, desperate aging. Abigail, what the hell is this? Tyler choked out, his voice cracking. The bank froze all our accounts. The authorities are at the office seizing my servers. It's an audit, Tyler, I said, my tone clinical. I told you yesterday you shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch. Honey, please, Angela begged, her eyes red and pleading. We're your family. We made a mistake. We see that now. But if you don't sign over the land, Tyler could go to prison. I looked at them, realizing that their entire identity had been leased by the very money they stole from me. Without their bank balance, they had no character to stand on. I delivered the finisher. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice to forge a signature and steal $750,000 from a child. I'm just making sure the balance sheet is finally accurate. The finality of the room was absolute. I watched as Tyler collapsed into one of my Italian leather chairs, his head in his hands, finally understanding that his power had been nothing more than an illusion fueled by theft. I didn't feel the need to shout or gloat. The silence of my penthouse was far more powerful than any argument. I simply slid a folder across the sleek mahogany table toward him. This is the eviction notice for the family estate, I said, my voice steady and cold. Thomson Global Partners now owns the property. You have 48 hours to clear out. I'm sure you'll find a way to manage after all. You're a real businessman, right? Gregory looked at me with a mixture of terror and newfound respect, but it was far too late for a seat at my table. I informed them that I would be donating the exact amount they had stolen 18 years ago, $750,000, to establish a permanent research fund for harbor preservation in my birth parents' names. That will be the only legacy the Thomson name has left, I concluded, signaling the end of the meeting. An hour later, the elevator closed on their pleading faces, and I was finally alone in the sanctuary of my own making. I returned to the university library that afternoon, breathing in the scent of old paper and dust. The familiar faces of the morning regulars greeted me as they always had casually, with a respect for the quiet. They didn't see the billionaire CEO, they saw the woman who knew where the most important stories were hidden. I opened my favorite manuscript, but before I began my work, I looked toward the window. I realized that for years, I had been waiting for them to notice my worth, but I had finally granted myself the permission to be luminous on my own terms. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was the architect of my own peace. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, your worth is your own. You don't need their permission to build something monumental. Share this with someone who needs a reminder to keep going. Like and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience.